This page has 3 Mishnahs, and we did, let's see, where did we get up to? We got up to we got up to really second Mishnah, Shiva. Sukkah Shiva, yeah. Okay, so the Gemara that we had learned on Friday was really the first Mishnah here. And the first Mishnah had mentioned that Halal and Simcha are going to be mitzvahs that apply for all 8 days of Sukkot. Of course, outside of Israel, there'll be Halal for 9 days. But we're talking about in Eretz Yisrael, it would be 8 days of Halal and Simcha, which really refers to the Shalmei Simcha, that they would eat meat. There was a mitzvah to eat meat, and that would apply on 8 days of Sukkot, all 8 days. And the Gemara Mishnah then said, the person is obligated Halal and Simcha and covered Yom Tov Achrid Shel Chag like all the other days of Sukkot. There's no difference between the 8th day and the other days. And when we say Halal, we mean the entire Halal, not like Rosh Chodesh, where we just say a half Halal. It's actually an entire Halal, all 8 days. And it's basically the last day of Sukkot is just like the other days, meaning the day of Shmini Atzeres is just like the other days of Sukkot. And the Gemara had said that we learned it from a pasuk of Hayisa Ach Sameach, that really it's redundant because it already says you should rejoice in your holiday. V'samachta b'chagecha, songs with V'samachta b'chagecha. And what does it need to repeat itself with the Hayisa Ach Sameach? And so the understanding is that it's going to add some type of simcha to the already joyous 7 days. So what is it adding? It's adding the last night, which is the night of Shmini Atzeres, Leil Yom Tov Ha'acharain, that the night of the last day, which basically means the night of Shmini Atzeres, that night is going to be obligated in simcha. What would that mean? That means that when you eat the meat from the korban, the sacrifice that was brought on the 7th day on Hoshana Rabbah, if you brought a shlamim, a peace offering on the 7th day, you would be fulfilling not only a mitzvah of eating kodshim, it's a mitzvah to eat the holy things, but not only that, but you'd actually be fulfilling the mitzvah of simcha if you ate it at night on Shmini Atzeres night. So you already sacrificed the shlamim. Now you're eating it at night, and you'll be fulfilling is a special mitzvah to have Shalmei Simcha that night. It's Simcha is for all 8 days. It includes Shmini Atzeres, and even though you didn't slaughter it on the 8th day, but you're eating it on the 8th night, that is considered fulfillment of the mitzvah of Simcha. And the Gemara says, really? That's what you're going to add, and you're not going to add the first night? I would think you should say the first night is a mitzvah of Simcha, or maybe, who says you should include the 8th night, the night of the 8th, maybe include the first night, because logically there's no mitzvah of Shalmei Simcha then, there's no mitzvah of rejoicing then, because there's no official sacrifice that was brought, because you don't bring sacrifices at night. So when Yom Tov kicks in, there's no sacrifices. But maybe if the pasuk says you should be joyous, maybe the pasuk is teaching us that we should actually bring a sacrifice on Erev Yom Tov, on Erev Sukkot. Maybe you should be bringing a sacrifice, and then you'll eat the meat that night, and you'll fulfill the mitzvah of simcha, of rejoicing. So maybe that's what the pasuk means, v'hayisa ach sameach. So on that, the Gemara says no. If you look at the wording, it says ach. Ach is like an exclusion, and it excludes the night, the first night. And so the word ach excludes the first night. In v'hayisa ach sameach includes the last night. So we need to exclude one. We got to add a different one. So we're going to exclude the first night and add the 8th night. The question, of course, of the Gemara is, who says you should add this one and exclude that one? Maybe you should add that one and exclude this one, maybe vice versa. And the Gemara says, you know why? Because I want to include the last night, because the last night has simcha before it. There's simcha all the days of Sukkot, so it would be logical to also have simcha on the night of the eighth day, that night before the eighth day, because all the days before have simcha. It would make sense to include this as well. The first night doesn't have simcha before it. There's no mitzvah of simcha before it, and therefore, I don't think that would be the what the Torah means to include the first night in simcha. And so the question would be, what about the fact that the last night, you may say there's no mitzvah of simcha afterwards, but the first night there's a mitzvah of simcha afterwards. So on that, it seems that Rashi overcomes that question. He gets around it by saying, no, if you have a mitzvah of simcha at night, the last night, it actually is a kal v'chomer, an a priori argument that there must be simcha even on the day afterwards. So we're including the simcha at night, which basically means that the eighth night has simcha before it and simcha after it. The first night has simcha after it, but doesn't have simcha before it. And therefore, we're going to include the mitzvah of simcha for the last night and not the first night. And that's the conclusion of the Gemara. On Friday, I mentioned to you that there is somewhat of a discussion here regarding the mitzvah of simcha on the first night of Yom Tov. Now, I mentioned to you that the Shagas Aryeh has a big question over here. He says, our Gemara seems to say clearly there's no mitzvah of simcha on the first night of Yom Tov. Now, that seems to contradict the other Gemara about Pesach that talks about that there is a mitzvah of simcha, because if you drank all 4 cups of wine in one shot, it says you didn't fulfill the mitzvah of the Dalit Kaisis, but you did fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. What do you mean there's no mitzvah of simcha the first night? The first night doesn't have a mitzvah of simcha. Mitzvah of simcha only kicks in when there's a Yom Tov, when there's a korban of shlamim, which would start on the next day. There's no mitzvah of simcha the night before. So it must be that there is a mitzvah of simcha, according to that Gemara. It says over there, if you drank all 4 cups of wine on Pesach night, you have a mitzvah. You fulfilled the mitzvah of simcha. I thought there wasn't a mitzvah of simcha on the first night of Yom Tov. So the Shagas Aryeh says, yeah, our Gemara says there's no mitzvah of simcha. That Gemara says there is a mitzvah of simcha. The difference is if it's rabbinic or biblical. Biblically, there's no mitzvah of simcha on the night of the first night of Yom Tov. There's no mitzvah of simcha biblically. On a rabbinic level, however, there is a mitzvah of simcha, and that mitzvah of simcha is rejoicing, and that mitzvah you fulfill. If you drank all 4 cups of wine in one shot, you would fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. That's the way the Shagas Aryeh answers the question. However, the Avnei Nezer says no. There's different types of simcha. There's the simcha of shalmei simcha. That, our Gemara says, there is no shalmei simcha. There's no shlamim, peace offering mitzvah of simcha. But the other elements of simcha, there is, even on a biblical level. So the Avnei Nezer would hold that there really is a mitzvah of simcha on the first night. And that's what the Gemara talks about when you drink wine, all 4 cups of wine, you would fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. If you drank all 4 cups of wine in one shot, you didn't fulfill 4 Dalit Kaisis, but you fulfilled the mitzvah of simcha on a biblical level, not shalmei simcha. Shalmei simcha is a whole other category. That's about a sacrifice of shlamim in rejoicing with Hashem on a korban shlamim, and that is that type of simcha, that joy is not the shalmei simcha is not fulfilled, and you don't have a mitzvah on the first night. The first night, that's what our Gemara concludes. So the Avnei Nezer would hold that there is a mitzvah of simcha, just not the sacrifice, not the shalmei simcha. It's a different type of simcha with drinking wine and maybe clothing and other types of simcha, other festive foods, and so on. Now the question is, so what's the difference? Now,
number one, there is a discussion about being mekadesh l'lovana on Yom Tov. Kiddush Levana is considered a simcha, and there's a concept of ein ma'arv and simcha b'simcha. You're not supposed to add two types of simcha at the same
time. Mix the simchas. Each simcha deserves its own event, so to speak. So because of that, you really should do Kiddush Levana beforehand. So according to the Avnei Nezer, biblically, then you would not want to do Kiddush Levana, or it'd be better not to do Kiddush Levana on the night of the first night of Yom Tov. According to the and we know that on Purim, even though we normally simcha the simcha, there's a rule that you are allowed to get married on Purim.
D'Rabbanan.
Simcha d'Rabbanan, you're allowed to do ma'arv and simcha b'simcha. So the same thing would apply here. According to the Shagas Aryeh, that the simcha on the first night is rabbinic, then there would
Rabbi, your sound is going in and out.
On the first night, because it's only rabbinic.
Rabbi, we're losing your sound.
Now, if you hold that it's biblical, according to the Avnei Nezer, then it would be ideal not to do Kiddush Levana on the first night, because it would be ein ma'arv and simcha b'simcha. Such an idea is brought down that this could be a difference between the two opinions. Now, we do know that the Magen Avraham, he brings down that you should make a chasana on Erev Yom Tov. You can make a chasana on Erev Shabbos, but don't make a chasana on Erev Yom Tov. In the olden days, people were very poor, and they would make chasanas right before Shabbos. Why? Because how would they have enough money to make a meal? They wouldn't. They would just use their Shabbos meal. That would be the chasana. So they would make the chasana right before Shabbos, and the meal of Shabbos was the chasana. That was the wedding.
Now.
Avraham says, don't do it Erev Yom Tov. Why not? Because ein ma'arvin simcha b'simcha, and there's a the simcha that's here on Yom Tov. It would be a contradiction to the simcha of the chasana. It would limit. It would minimize the simcha of the chasana. The simcha of the chasana would minimize the simcha of Yom Tov.
Don't make a chasana on Erev Yom Tov. In Avraham is that he's following the Avnei.
So biblical mitzvah simcha on the first night, and that's why you wouldn't be allowed
make a chasana on Erev Yom Tov, even though you would be.
The Shabbos is no mitzvah of simcha, but on Yom Tov there is a mitzvah of simcha on a biblical level according to the Magen Avraham. Therefore, you couldn't make a chasana seemingly on Erev Yom Tov.
It's a little insight into this.
There's a mitzvah of simcha on the first night of Yom Tov.
So,
I can't hear you.
So we say Yitzchok v'malachusach.
Here, Jeffrey, I cannot hear him.
Oh, I turned. That's the problem with your machine too, because we couldn't hear some of what you said.
Oh boy, I think I just fixed it. I didn't. I wish you would have told me.
Yeah.
So wait, did everyone hear everything that I said?
With slight interruptions. Now you can hear me, right?
Yeah, clearly. Oh, I'm sorry.
So I know a lot of people say there's no rule of Simcha for Shabbos, but clearly the liturgy, the prayers say there's Simcha on Shabbos. Yismechu v'malachusecha, right? Some people say all three prayers, Yismechu in it, and we say Ba'avov Ratzon, we say, but you don't use the word B'simcha v'soson except on Yom Tov. But I think that it's hair splitting. We have to make sacrifices before Sukkot also, the day before Sukkot, when we come to Yerushalayim, because you can't make the personal sacrifices, I understand, on the day of Yom Tov itself. You can do it in Chol HaMoed, but not on the day of Yom Tov. So it seems to me, whenever Yom Tov it is, you come, and Erev Yom Tov, you do a sacrifice if possible, so that you eat the meat from the sacrifice on the night of Yom Tov, even if it's Sukkot. And
Mordechai, did you want to say something about that?
Now, what I was going to ask is if a chassid was held on Purim, how would people know if it's a real chassid?
Right. Nice little point.
Objection.
You got to make it's a good point. You got to make sure that the witnesses are not drunk and the rabbi's not drunk and the chassan and kala aren't drunk. Right, they have to make sure that they are full of. You have to make them walk a straight line. You have the police test them before. Yeah. But anyway, Jeffrey, about what you said, Yismechu Malchuscha, it's a good question. I don't know if that's 100% proof that it's a mitzvah of simcha. In other words, that it's an obligation of simcha. It's a term used that the Yidden are mesameach, but the actual mitzvah of simcha, maybe anyway, it's a good question. But I'm just mentioning that it could be that it's a term used that's lav dafka. But we'd have to take a look and see what the commentaries say. This, especially with those poskim that bring out that there's no mitzvah of simcha on Shabbos. And I'll give you an example. If I remember correctly, there's a inyan to have fish, even if you don't like it so much. Why? Because the mitzvah of oineg is to make Shabbos look beautiful. So even though you don't enjoy fish, but you should have it as a mitzvah of oineg. But Yom Tov is a mitzvah of simcha. Therefore, and I think this is brought down. Therefore, if you don't really enjoy fish, then don't have it on Yom Tov, because Yom Tov is the inyan of simcha. So I think it's I think the concept is brought not just here, but it's discussed in other areas as well of Shabbos about the mitzvah of simcha and the mitzvah of oineg, the difference between the two. But okay, anyway, it's a good point, good question. Yisbuchu Malchus. We'll have to take a look at the Mefarshim on
the Ashkenazic prayer doesn't have it for all three. We don't say in the evening. But if you go to Chabad, I don't know your liturgy, but I'm pretty sure that you say Yismechu in the evening too. So, and certainly, when you're bringing up your children, like, you want them to feel joy on Shabbat. You have to make it a sort of a special effort that you do things to bring joy to your family.
You know what I'm thinking? Something else came to my mind, and that is that the Yidden are mesameach in Hashem's malchus. Those that are Shomer Shabbos, they're mesameach in Hashem's malchus. It doesn't really talk about the mitzvah of simcha on Shabbos. It's just saying that the Yidden are happy, are rejoicing. They rejoice with the fact that Hashem is Melech. So maybe it's not really. I mean, it's a hint. It's definitely a decent hint. I'll definitely give it to you for that.
What kind of verb form is it then? To me it means let the Jews be happy.
No, I think it's a past tense. Yismechu. Oh, maybe it could be.
Past tense would look different. It means it's either a future or.
I guess you're right. It does sound more like future.
Yeah, I'm a big grammar guy.
I guess you're right. Yeah, it probably is future. Okay, all right. Anyway, whatever it is, okay.
But
Anyway,
it's, so
I definitely think
certainly,
it's good.
so certainly I would expect that there's also Simcha the same way on Yom Tov, even if it's the first night of Sukkot.
Now, you
And
say Yismachu on Mincha on Shabbos?
no, we don't say it.
So our Nusach doesn't have Yismachu on Mincha.
No, okay, just Shacharis and the Musaf. Yes,
Yeah. No, and the night
and at night.
on Myru. Yeah. But
So Sukkot, it seems to me, the rabbis originally said in the Gemara that we studied that you say Shechianu when you build your sukkah. There's certainly the inyan of being happy before the Yom Tov for Sukkot, because you have so many preparations. You get the lulav, and everybody is in a happy mode, right? And we don't say any more. We don't say any tel moles after Yom Kippur, because you're in a happy mood preparing for Yom Tov. We don't say Tachnun.
I hear you.
Okay.
So 1 second. So what you wanna prove is that there seems to be a concept of simcha even before Yom Tov, and mainly what you're saying is any korban that was sacrificed, you should be able to fulfill it, even though you don't bring shalmei simcha. But you're saying other korbanos that would have been brought on erev Yom Tov, you would be fulfilling the mitzvah of shalmei simcha that night. The only thing is that it's not there's no official korban that you need to bring. It's not like Erev Pesach, where there is a korban that you bring. But on Erev Sukkot, there's not an official korban. In fact, the korbanos that you bring on Sukkot should be brought on the first day. And if you don't, the other ones might be a tashlumen. They're either a kulon tashlumen zeloseh or kulon tashlumen larishoin. But as far as I know, and I'm not an expert in korbanos, but the Erev Sukkot was not, it's not like they had automatically korbanos. But even if they did, because it's not an obligation, and we see it in our Gemara, so there definitely wasn't a official responsibility of everyone to make sure to do it. Our Gemara clearly spells out that it's not a mitzvah on the first night that there's no mitzvah of simcha.
No, we have a mitzvah when you come, especially a male person comes to the Beis HaMikdash for Yom Tov. You have to bring a riyah, right? Right.
But the Oilas Riyah in the Shalmei Chagiga, right? Now, these korbanos, if I'm not mistaken, and I'd have to look it up again, but I believe they're both brought on the first day of Yom Tov. And if you didn't bring it on the first day, there's tashlumen.
Yeah, so I don't understand that, because I thought you cannot do personal sacrifices on the actual days of Yom Tov, only Chol HaMoed or Erev Yom Tov.
That would be a korban nedava, not a
riyah.
If I'm not mistaken, but we could look it up. I just don't.
Eventually, Neil says we'll get to study.
We'll take a look. I'll in fact I'll write it down. I'll just take a look, because it's probably an obvious. Okay, we'll just the korbanos of erev korbanos oilas riyah and shalmei chagiga. Okay. Anyway, so and then we have to look up Yismachu. All right, we got two good questions over there.
There's an extra credit. We have extra credit for that.
All right,
Rabbi, on
yes,
Sukkot, there's the korbanos which are decreasing. They represent the nations, and then day by day they decrease. So there are korbanos.
No, of course there are korbanos on Yom Tov. What Jeffrey is wondering is there any korbanos erev Yom Tov? That's what he's wondering. And he's wondering, and really the Oilas Riyah is not part of his question. It's really about the Shalmei Chagiga, because the Oilas Riyah is not eaten. So that would not be part of the Simcha. The Simcha would only be maybe a Shalmei Chagiga if you ate it. That's really an additional question that he's sort of hinting to, and that is, if you ate a shalmei chagiga, would you fulfill the mitzvah of simcha because you're eating meat and it's a carbon meat? Or, or do you need it to be a specific carbon just for simcha and not for your obligation? That would be another point, Jeffrey, that we'd have to look up. Are you, when you do sacrifice the shalmei chagiga and you eat that, is that also part of a fulfillment of a mitzvah of simcha? Or are you only fulfilling the mitzvah of simcha if you bring a special shalmei simcha? Or is the shalmei simcha only when you run out of the shalmei chagiga? Or is it an entity of its own? So that's another really question that we just have to look up. It's probably like right there in the Rambam. We could probably take a look. I just don't have any svarim here where I am. But anyway, so Mitzvah Hashem, I'll try to look it up. Okay.
Also, Rabbi,
yes.
You said before about that in the olden days, the people would have a chasana leading right into Erev Shabbos. I think the Alter Rebbe's chasana was like that because Shabbos fell out on Chai Elul, and that's how they say that he got married on Chai Elul, because technically speaking, he got married on Friday and it led into Shabbos, which was Chai Elul.
Right. I will tell you that I was speaking to a Rav, Isaac. He told me that there was a situation where people wanted to get married on Erev Shabbos, and the Rav of his Bezdin refused. They said, we're not doing it. So they found some other ad hoc, some type of a Bezdin that okayed it, and they said they'll do the chasana. It turned out that the chassan got into a car accident that day, and it was like a crazy hectic. The just made it, maybe, just to. So it was like, you see why nowadays we don't exactly do. It's not common minhag. Besides although it would be nice to save a lot of money, but all the details that everyone's so involved with, could create quite a it would be quite stressful and overwhelming, and could lead into disaster. So they don't. Most of the rabbanim don't do weddings on, or at least this.
Maybe there's the idea of you don't mix simchas.
No, that's not the issue, because you could do it. That was a common minhag that everyone did. Everyone did their chasanas on Erev Shabbos, and the reason why would be because the mitzvah of simcha is not on Shabbos, and it's not called ein marvin simcha b'simcha. It's not a problem of mixing two joyous occasions together, because it's a mitzvah of eineg on Shabbos, not a mitzvah of simcha.
I thought you just said the lashon of the davening is yismechu.
That's a question on what I said. That's not what I said. That's Jeffrey's question on what I said, was that does say yismechu on Shabbos. We say it in the. Now, it doesn't exactly say it's the wording is not exactly that it's a mitzvah to have simcha. It says that let the Yidden rejoice on Hashem's kingship. So is that implying that there's a mitzvah of rejoicing, or is that just a bracha that we would like to rejoice on Shabbos? You know what I mean? So it's not 100%, it's not a very strong question, but it's definitely a good hint that there might be some type of a mitzvah of simcha.
And isn't when they say oneg Shabbos, isn't oneg simcha?
No, so there's a difference between the two, and I mentioned that there could be a difference maybe in halacha as well with regard to oneg. That oneg would be to beautify the Shabbos. It's more of a beautification of the Shabbos, because it's like a mitzvah to have fish, even if you don't exactly like it. Obviously, if you're allergic, is another story. But if you don't exactly like it, it would be like an inyan to have fish on Shabbos. But on Yom Tov, there wouldn't be. Why? Because on Yom Tov, it's an inyan of simcha. You have to personally rejoice. Einig is not personal. It's more of the communal. That looks, it looks like a element of rejoicing. So that would be the mitzvah of einig. Okay, so getting back to where we are up to. So we are up to the new Mishnah, Sukkah Shiva. So we're going to start from the second Mishnah on page 48a, Sukkah Shiva Ketzad. Okay, we are, 15 lines maybe from the top. 5, 10, 17 lines from the top of the page on 48a. Sukkah Shiva Ketzad. How do you fulfill the mitzvah of Sukkah for 7 days? So the Mishnah says that Gomar milachol, when you finish eating, lo yater es sukkosoi, don't untie your sukkah to start disassembling your sukkah. Aval mayrid es hakelim min hamincha ulamayla. But you would take down the kalim, your furniture, your items, your beautifications, your table, your different items that you have in the sukkah. You take it down min hamincha ulamayla, from the mincha time, which is 9.5 hours into the day, which on a regular day, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. So 9.5 hours would be 3:30. From 3:30 and on, you would do that with ne kavod yom tov ha'achron shel chag, in order for the yom tov, in order for the honor the last day of yom tov that you're preparing for yom tov. So it's Hoshana Rabbah, and the Mishnah says you should not take down your sukkah. Don't take it down. Leave it up. And of course, one of the reasons would be that you might need to eat it. And additional reason could be that it might be like a bizui of the mitzvah, that you're rushing to take it down. You're taking it down even before the time is up. And another reason could be based on the pasuk. These are different rishonim say different reasons. So again, the simple reason why you shouldn't take it down, because you still have a mitzvah to dwell in it, to sleep in it, and if people come by or you want to have a meal, you have to eat in it. So don't take it down. But rather, what you should do is you could take your kalim down, and by doing that, you're showing that you're preparing for Yom Tov. So it's an honor for Yom Tov. You're showing that you're preparing, but don't take down your sukkah. And we said, in addition to the fact that you shouldn't take it down because you might need it, the other Rishonim seem to say other reasons as well, that it's like a bizui for the mitzvah by taking it down. That it's like prohibited. The Mishnah is basically saying, don't take it down, like it's prohibited to take down. You're not allowed to take it down. Why? Because it would be like a bizui for the mitzvah. It's like embarrassing the mitzvah. And additionally, it would be possibly against the literal meaning of the pasuk, that you're supposed to make the sukkah for 7 days. And that the sukkah should be 7 full days. Sukkah is teishvu shivas yamim. The sukkah you should dwell in a full 7 days, and therefore don't take it down before. But for Yom Tov purposes, to honor the Yom Tov, you would take out your kalim, your utensils. Now, why does it say they would go down? Yored, moidridin as a kalim. You lower the kalim. Jeffrey, this is right up your alley.
Yeah. So
what's the reason? Come on, tell us.
Oh, well, you certainly could have a sukkah in the tree or something like that, maybe, or on an animal, right. We discussed, right? But I think that the idea is that when you put up a sukkah, everything is being built, and you're raising it. I mean, like we say, when you
spiritual, you're giving a too spiritual reason. I was expecting the simple Jeffrey reason of in the olden days they would build their sukkahs on the roof.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah.
But
And
in America, in our olden days, we didn't do that though. The people went up to their house and went down to the sukkah, especially in Manhattan. Yeah,
right. But, all right. Anyway, so it's brought down in Rashi and Shabbos. He mentions this that they would commonly build their sukkah on top, and so the term yored, the lower the kalim, was a common term. But anyway, whatever. I thought in the Lower East Side they built the sukkahs on the roofs over there. That's what I thought. Maybe not. Okay. So Anyway, so the Mishnah, the Gemara now says, what is the situation? What do you do if you ain't like Kalim Lohidrid Mahu? You don't have any utensils to take down. This is the Gemara's question. You want to honor Shmini Atzeres. So how do you honor it by taking down the Kalim if you don't have any Kalim? Yeah, ain't like Kalim Lohidrid. You have no vessels to lower Mahu. What should you do? So the Gemara says, "Ein l'kelim elaki yishtamish b'may yishtamish." What did you use when you dwelled in the sukkah? What type of utensils did you use? So the Gemara says, no. Ella ein loy makom lahayrid kelim. I have no place to put my kelim from the sukkah, and I'm only going to be stuck eating my meal in the sukkah because I can't take down the sukkah. And so I'm normally eating outside, and I don't have, or that's my only place that has a big area for a communal meal for my whole family. And so I'm going to be eating in the sukkah. I don't know kalim. I have no ein loy makom lahayrid kelim. So what should I do and not transgress bal toisif? So it's a whole new question. Initially, the question was, I want to fulfill the mitzvah of honoring Yom Tov. And the question was, how do I honor Yom Tov if I'm not taking the kalim down because I know where to put them? Now the question is more, what do I do and not transgress bal toisif? Bal toisif means adding on to the mitzvahs and making like a new mitzvah. I'm now going to dwell in the sukkah on a day that's not sukkahs. So what do I do if I have no place I'm going to be eating in my sukkah? So mahu, what should I do? So Reb Chia bar Ashi, Amar, Reb Chia bar Ashi says, Peiches ba arba'a, you should remove from the schach 4 tfachim. In this way, you will invalidate the sukkah. And if you invalidate the sukkah, guess what? You're not transgressing dwelling in a sukkah on a day that's not sukkahs. Shmini Atzeres in Eretz Yisrael, where they know what day it is, you're not allowed to dwell in the sukkah. And because you're not allowed to dwell in the sukkah, if you did, it would be bal toisif. You'd be adding on to the mitzvahs. But if you hassle your sukkah, then there is no bal toisif.
Here, Rabbi, it says Reb Chia bar Rav.
Right. So on the side, it changes it to Ashi. In the Rosh, the gear says Ashi, and the same thing is in the Rif. So I just followed the more later print. But you're right, there is such a gear, so Chia bar Rav. Okay. So this first rabbi says that you should remove from the schach daled tfachim, 4 handbreadths, and this way you will invalidate the sukkah. Now, the question on this opinion is that does 4 tfachim invalidate a sukkah? If you have an empty space of 4 tfachim, is that what invalidates the sukkah? We learned that 3 handbreadths is what invalidates a sukkah, not 4 handbreadths. So why is the opinion of Reb Chia bar Ashi, who's explaining the law about not transgressing bal toisif, he says, remove 4 tfachim, 4 handbreadths of schach, how would that, why would you want it, why would it say 4 handbreadths when really it's 3 handbreadths, and they'll parcel it with 3 handbreadths? This is, of course, a big topic of discussion. Tosfos over here on the side asks this question, and he leaves it with a question. All the Rishonim all talk about this, and one of the understandings is that we're assuming that he's not going to just leave it empty, but he'll put some puzzle stuff up there. So if he puts puzzle schach up there, in order to make it really puzzle, you would need 4 tfachim to make it puzzle, not 3. You'd need 4 handbreadths of puzzle schach to make a puzzle. If you have empty space, 3 tfachim would be enough. But if you're going to refill it, so then if you're going to use a substitute, then 4 tfachim makes sense. And that's one of the ways of understanding of explaining this and answering Tosfos's question. Another way of answering it is that what we're trying to do is cover ourselves, even if you have a big sukkah. Now, if you have a big sukkah with 4 walls, so even if you have an empty space of 3 tfachim, you're not really ruining the sukkah, because each sukkah, each side is a kosher sukkah. So you don't really ruin it if you have 3. When do you ruin a sukkah with three handbreadths of empty space? Is if you only have 3 walls, and this ruins the whole sukkah. Because it separates the sukkah in half, and each sukkah only has 2 walls. Then fine, then you ruin it. But if you have a 4-walled sukkah, and so how do you ruin a 4-walled sukkah? So the thing is that you're not really ruining it, but what you're doing is making a clear heker, clear recognition, because it's dalet tfachim. When you have a big sukkah and it's 4 walls, you don't actually ruin it, but you do have a sheer chashuv, some significant measure of psul, of invalid area in the sukkah, and that is a sign that you are not having kavana, intent to dwell in the sukkah and transgressing Bal Tosef, adding on to the mitzvah. No, you are just dwelling in this area because you have no other place. And so you made a heker, you made some type of a siman, it's a shir chashuv, and it shows that you're not trying to fulfill a mitzvah by dwelling here. You're just using this as a space. So you don't really have to passel the sukkah according to this interpretation. According to the other interpretations, you really need to make the sukkah puzzle. Now, there is another way of understanding that maybe maybe 3 tfachim, even though it will passel it, you could say that even in a small, like the way the Ritva, the way the commentary that I just explained is basically saying that a small sukkah, 3 tfachim, is enough. But for other sukkahs, you need to do a shir chashuv. There is another way of saying that the Gemara is saying simply, you really need dalet tfachim, because even passeling isn't enough. You need more of a heker. And maybe that's the main point, that you need to actually have a heker even if you passeled your sukkah. Maybe even if it's invalid with 3 tfachim, but you need 4 tfachim to make a good heker, make it recognizable that you're not having kavana, intent to fulfill the mitzvah of dwelling in the sukkah. So anyway, that's the first opinion, that your peiches ba arba. Now, for Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi Amar, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi says, madlik ba es haner, you light a candle, and by lighting a candle, you show that your kavana is not to dwell l'shem mitzvah, because according to halacha, when you have a small sukkah, you're not allowed to light a candle there, and basically, if you do that, you're basically showing that you're not fulfilling the mitzvah of sukkah. And the Gemara explains that v'loi pligi, and these 2 rabbis are not arguing, because the Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, who gives this option of lighting a candle, Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is talking about b'nei halon. This is for us, meaning in Babylon. In Babylon, we are we dwell in the sukkah even on Shmini Atzeres, and because of that, we cannot remove the schach. And in Eretz Yisrael, Reb Chia bar Ashi is talking about you could remove the schach, and you don't dwell in the sukkah on Shmini Atzeres, and therefore you would. One second, let me just look at Rashi here. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, it would seem that Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi is talking about you'd light a candle there, and you don't have the option of removing the schach, because you really need the schach for Shmini Atzeres, not for Simchas Torah. But for Eretz Yisrael, in Eretz Yisrael, you would remove the schach, and there's no problem of ruining it because you really don't need it. Now, and so that is the answer that the Gemara gives. So the Gemara says, this statement of Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, Tenach Sukkah Ketana, Sukkah Gedola Ma'ikol Meimer. What would Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi say about a big sukkah? That lighting a candle does not show that you're not fulfilling the mitzvah. You're not transgressing anything by having a candle in the sukkah. So the Gemara says, the Ma'ayol Bamani Michla, that according to Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi, the other option would be bringing in food vessels. The Amar Rava, because Rava says, Mani Michla Bar Mi Metalalta, that the food vessels that you should really take out once they're used, when you finish eating, they're disgusting. So you should take them bar outside mimetalalta from the sukkah. Mani mishtiya, but the drink vessels, meaning cups, you could have and leave them even if they're used bimetalalta in the sukkah. They're not disgusting, and therefore you could leave them in the sukkah. So what do you do if you want to show that you're not dwelling in the sukkah for the mitzvah? Bring in vessels that are food vessels that are used. In this way, you're showing that you're not considering this a sukkah anymore. It's now no longer sukkahs, and you're just dwelling here because there's no other option. You don't have another place to dwell. Now, will tell you that this is a very common issue that people have, especially in shuls, that they're making a big kiddush on Simchas Torah, and the only place that they have available is what maybe they used to use this area for the kiddushim, but on sukkahs they change it into a sukkah, and now it's a sukkah, and they're stuck because they don't have a place for kiddush. And Simchas Torah, they want to invite everyone to the sukkah, but you can't. You're not allowed to eat in the sukkah. So the way, if I'm not mistaken, the way most shuls do it is they bring in garbages, because officially you're not allowed to bring a garbage in the sukkah. And so the fact that you're bringing in a garbage is basically the same idea as bringing in the dirty plates and in the sukkah, like Rava says, that is a way of permitting you to use the sukkah even when it's not sukkahs, because you're giving a hecker clarity that this is not meant for a sukkah. It's not for the mitzvah of sukkah. In fact, you're really clearly not using it as a sukkah because you're even bringing the garbage in, which is an interesting halacha. Most people don't know that you're not allowed to have a garbage in a sukkah. Instead, bring out the garbage to this garbage outside. But anyway, so that's and that's another also what we see here in the Gemara is you're supposed to remove once the people finish eating. You should don't leave the dirty plates and stuff around. You're supposed to remove it from the sukkah, and if you would leave it around, that would be a siman that it's not really a sukkah. You're not doing it for the mitzvah. Anyway, so that's this Gemara, and this is the source of people putting the garbages inside the sukkah. Okay, for Simchas Torah, at least outside of Israel. And I guess in Eretz Yisrael, they would do that on Shmini Atzeres. In Eretz Yisrael, you could do that on Shmini Atzeres. All right, so that's that Mishnah. And then we have the next Mishnah, which is Nisoch Hamayim. Nisoch Hamayim. Now, Nisoch Hamayim, the Mishnah says, it was the ceremony, which we've learned about in Tractate Tainus, really, spoke about this at length, that the Nisoch Hamayim, pouring of the water, it was done on all the days of, at least it's a machlekes really, how many times, how much it was done. But and we'll soon see in our Mishnah even. But the Nisoch Hamayim was done on Sukkos, and the simple understanding was it was done all 7 days. And how was it done? So the Mishnah says, Ketzad, how was it done? Shleiches shel zahav, they had a pitcher of gold, but mechazekes shleisha lugin, it could handle 3 lugs, and haya mamale min hashilayach, they would fill it up from the famous Shilayach spring, which was right by the Beis Hamikdash. There's a spring called the Shilayach spring, and they would bring the water inside the Beis Hamikdash. Higiyu l'shar hamayim, they would reach the gate of the water gate. Taku vehiriyu v'taku, they would blow the shofar tekiah, teruah, and tekiah. And they would do this as a sign of simcha. And it says, Allah bakebesh, they would go up the ramp. And as we know, the Mizbeach was right outside the holies. And they would go up the ramp. The ramp was on the southern side of the Mizbeach. And they would go up the ramp. Upana l'smailai, and the Kayanim that went up, or the Kohen that went up, he would turn to his left. Ufana l'smailai would turn to his left, which is, he's walking up this on this southern side of the Mizbeach, and he turns to his left. His left would be west. So he would turn west, and that basically is which corner is on his left. So his left corner would be the southwestern corner. So he would turn to that corner. And it says, Shnei Sfalim Shel Kesef Hayusham. There were 2 bowls of silver that were there. And these 2 bowls of silver were meant for, what were the 2 bowls of silver for? For the water libation and for the wine libation. Reb Yehuda Aimer Shel Sid Hayu. Reb Yehuda says that the 2 bowls were made out of plaster. Ella shahayu mashcharin pneihen mipnei hayayim. But their face, meaning their outside, was darkened because of the water. Let me mute everyone. Somehow we're getting some noise here.
Saying that here it says limestone.
What did you say, David?
It says limestone.
Lime.
It says they were limestone basins.
Okay, all right. Okay, I'm just going to mute everyone 1 second. Okay. Uh-oh, did I lose everyone? Anyone here?
We hear you.
Oh, because I don't have the picture in front of me. I don't know why. Okay. Somehow I lost everyone in the picture. Strange. Okay. Anyway, I'll just continue. So Rabbi Yehuda says it was Sid, and Sid. Okay, we could translate it as limestone or plaster. Ella shahayu mashcharin pneihem ibnei hayayin. The silver, but rather it looked like silver because it was darkened from the wine. Now the Mishnah then says that uminu kavin timin shnei chutmin dakin. They were pierced with 2 nostrils, thin nostrils. It had something like sticking out of the bowl. It was like a choitem, like a nose, like a nostril sticking out. That the bowl had almost like a dispenser sticking out of the bowl. Oh, that's why it shows the whiteboard here. Okay, I don't know how to fix this, but anyway. All right, so can you all hear me? Okay, now I see you. Okay. All right, you can hear me. Okay, so it had these nostrils thin nostrils, and echad meuba ve'echad dak. One of them was thick, and it was one of the hole in the in one of the bowls was a bigger hole, and one of them was a thinner hole. Why? That the water and the wine should end at the same moment. And water flows faster than wine. And so, so they made the wine a little bigger hole so that they'll end at the same time. And these were placed on that near that corner of the Mizbeach. So the Ma'aravai, the one in the west, the more closer to the west, was the water one, Shalmayim. That was the water one. Mizrachai Shal Yayin. The one more to the east was wine. Why is that? So it's based on Tadir v'she'enoi Tadir koidim, something that's more, you do it more often, that has preference, and therefore the one that was closer was going to be the wine one, that was closer to the koyin, and the other one was more closer to the corner, and that was the water one, which was done less often. Now, ira shel mayim l'soich shel yayin. What happens if you mistakenly poured the libation into the wrong bowl? Shel yayin l'soich shel mayim. You poured either the water into the wine or the wine into the l'soich shel mayim. Yatza, you have fulfilled your obligation, and you don't have to pour again. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer beloig hayamanasich. Rabbi Yehuda argues on two things. He argues, number one, it wasn't 3 lugin. It was 1 lug, so the golden utensil only needed to hold 1 lug, and which argues on the first opinion, which was 3 lugin. And kol shmaina, he would use a lug for all 8 days. So here we see Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, which we learned a while back as well, and Tractate Tainus as well, that Rabbi Yehuda holds that they would actually pour the water libation even on Shmini Atzeres, Nisoch HaMayim. Now, so Rabbi Yehuda argues on these 2 points, and he says they would also use, they would use it 1 lug, and they would also do it on Shmini Atzeres an additional day. To the Menasech, the one pouring it, they would tell him that lift up your hands, that everyone should see that you're pouring into the bowl on the Mizbeach, and we're nervous otherwise that you might be a tzeduki, someone who's like a person who doesn't believe in Torah Shabbal Pet, doesn't believe in the oral Torah, and they don't believe in the Nisoch HaMayim ceremony, and that's what we're nervous of, and we want to see you actually do it, because then we'll know that you believe in Torah Shabbal Pet. And you're not a tzeduki. Tzedukis are the people who didn't believe in the oral Torah. They only went according to the literals. They went according to the words, the way the Torah says it, and they don't follow the rabbis. And we specifically want to see that he does it right. Because one time there was a tzeduki who was the kohen gadol, and he was pouring it, and he poured it on his feet. And everyone through the at least I understood that he's a kohen gadol. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was just a regular kohen. But the kohen that did it, he was they realized he's a tzeduki because he didn't do the actual thing. He poured it on the floor, and they pelted him with their esrogim. They stoned him. And then the Mishnah says, oh, my time is up. All right, I'm going to stop here. Sei gesund, everyone. Have a wonderful day.